I'm not ashamed.
What were God's instructions concerning the Passover? This is the question that we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of Exodus on walking through the Bible.
His word, the glory of his cross.
If you have a Bible with you, you can turn to Exodus chapter 12. We're going to be reading from verses 1 to 11. If you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So, Exodus chapter 12, beginning at verse 1. Now the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, This month shall be your beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year to you. Speak to all the congregation of Israel, saying, On the 10th of this month every man shall take for himself a lamb according to the house of his father, a lamb for a household. And if the household is too small for the lamb, let him and his neighbor next to his house take it according to the number of the persons. According to each man's need, you shall make your count for the lamb. Your lamb shall be without blemish, a male of the first year. You may take it from the sheep or from the goats. Now you shall keep it unto the 14th day of the same month. Then the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it at twilight. And they shall take some of the blood and put it on the two doorposts and on the lintel of the houses where they eat it. Then they shall eat the flesh on that night, roasted with fire, with unleavened bread, and with bitter herbs they shall eat it. Do not eat it raw, nor boiled at all with water, but roast it in fire, its head with its legs and its entrails. You shall let none of it remain until morning, and what remains of it in the morning you shall burn with fire. And thus you shall eat it, with a belt on your waist, your sandals on your feet, and your staff in your hand. So you shall eat it in haste. It is the Lord's Passover. At the end of the last chapter, we had Moses announcing to Pharaoh the 10th and final plague that God would inflict upon Egypt, which was the death of the firstborn son. This plague would be inflicted upon every household in Egypt, including the house of Pharaoh, God's judgment on Pharaoh for his disobedience, and Egypt's treatment as the whole on the children of Israel. The plague, however, would not affect the firstborn son of the children of Israel. With a break in the narrative, the story in chapter 12, we come to understand why. Verse 1 tells us that the instructions that God gave Moses concerning the Passover actually preceded God giving Moses the law at Mount Sinai, where they were given in Egypt. Yes, these instructions would be repeated at Mount Sinai, but the fact that this festival and the Feast of Unleavened Bread actually preceded Sinai shows us the importance to God of the Passover, for as we studied in Matthew, it typified the sacrifice of Jesus on the cross. God told Moses that the Passover month, which will be identified in chapter 13, would now become the first month of the year for the Israelites. We start our year in January, shortly after the beginning of winter, but the Israelites will start their year in April, shortly after the beginning of spring. On the 10th day of this month, each family was to select a lamb that would be killed for the Passover. If the family was too small to eat an entire lamb, then this family and his neighbor's family were to select one lamb for both families and observe the Passover together. In the Hebrew, the word translated as lamb is a general term that could mean a sheep or a goat of any age, but in today's reading we find that the lamb to be selected was to be without blemish, a male of the first year. The lamb could be taken from the sheep or from the goats. But the lamb was to be without blemish is the reason that it was selected on the 10th day of the month, so that it could be examined for 4 days before it is sacrificed. On the 14th day of the month, it is to be sacrificed at twilight. Some versions would have the phrase between the evenings stated here. So at what time was the Passover to be sacrificed? To the Israelites, twilight would be towards the evening and would correspond to 3 p.m. in the afternoon. Knowing that the 14th day of the month actually began the evening before, we know that the Passover lamb was actually to be killed towards the end of the day of the 14th day of the month, and not at the beginning of the day. This is significant because Jesus was said to have died at the 9th hour of the day, 3 p.m., and since he is described as our Passover, we know that he died on the 14th day of the first month of the Israelite calendar. After killing the lamb, they were to take the blood of the lamb and put it on the doorposts and the lentils of the house. The doorposts are the two side posts of the door frame, while the lintel is the crossbeam of the door frame. Note, they were not to place the blood on the threshold of the door frame, the bottom of the door frame, so they don't trodden underfoot the blood of the lamb. Similarly, in Hebrews 10:29, it is said that Christians are not to trodden underfoot the blood of the Lamb of God. The flesh of the lamb is to be roasted by fire, not baked or boiled, showing that this sacrifice was to be a burnt offering. They were to eat the lamb with unleavened bread and bitter herbs. It is not said directly here that there was to be no leaven in their houses. That instruction would come on later in this chapter. They were to eat it entirely that night and not save anything until morning. Anything left in the morning was to be burned with fire. Finally, they were to eat this meal in haste, with their belt on their waist, sandals on their feet, and staff in their hand, for shortly thereafter they were going to leave Egypt. This is the Lord's Passover. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of Exodus chapter 12, verses 12 to 17, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time.
I'm not ashamed.
Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.
Of his cross.